And we're going to bring up to the stage Heidi Furman, the Director of Adventures. How are you doing, Heidi?
Doing well, Sarah.
Great, and
Thank
she
you
is
for
going
having
to
me.
introduce Jeremy for us.
Hello, everyone. It is my honor to welcome, or to do the intro for Jeremy on behalf of Adventures. We are a company here in Columbia that helps to start other companies by kind of helping out on the operational side of things so that the business leaders can do what they do best, which is grow their company. Our founder is Brent Beshore, and he couldn't be here today, sadly. But he and Jeremy have been friends for a while now. And Jeremy actually came to Columbia recently to come check out the startup scene here. And so he's familiar with it, excited about what's going on here. And so that's fun. He's a great guy. We're thrilled to have him here. So a bit about Jeremy Johnson. He is the co-founder and president of the undergraduate programs at 2U, which is one of the highest funded education technology startups in the United States. 2U partners with top-tier universities to deliver rigorous graduate and undergraduate 4-credit programs online. 2U is transforming online education, offering 4-credit courses from world-class institutions. Jeremy is a lifelong technology entrepreneur with a passion for leveraging the internet to advance and enhance the way people interact. In 2008, Jeremy co-founded 2U with John Katzman, founder of the Princeton Review. And now at 28 years old, Jeremy is at the forefront of the online education revolution. And he was just named the most influential person in education by Forbes 30 Under 30, which is huge. We could not be happier to have Jeremy Johnson joining us today. Please help
Sarah,
me
can you hear me?
welcome him.
Yay! Jeremy, it's great to see you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to give you a Hangout high five. Welcome to our Google Plus Hangout, and welcome to Boom. We are excited.
Awesome. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell the people watching where you are coming from physically. Where are you hanging out
I'm
with us?
live from Southern California right now, although I'm from New York, actually. I'm actually out at Claremont and Pomona into the Claremont College system, meeting with a number of groups of faculty members and administrators today.
Well, that is great. Well, we want to talk to you, obviously, about 2U and some of your other projects that you're working on. You are involved in some of the biggest changes in education, really, that have come along in a while, and we're interested in chatting with you about that. Tell us about what 2U is doing and how this concept started. And for those not familiar, what is 2U?
Yeah, of course. So 2U is a company that partners with great schools around the country to build out preeminent online, up until recently, degree programs, and more recently, actual individual courses. And I'll explain that in a second. So we started 5 years ago with the notion that online education didn't have to be something that only bad schools did. You could actually create an online academic experience that had the same student outcomes, the same level of quality as you have on campus at the best schools in the country. But it would require a unique partnership between a company that understood infrastructure and logistics and technology, who could partner with great schools to help bring those schools online. It would be very difficult to do this as just as a company, but it would also be very difficult for individual schools to do it on their own. So what we do is we bring sort of the best of what a for-profit company can bring, things like very, very strong technology, logistics, infrastructure, and combine that with the extraordinary academic standards, teaching, the things that great universities do best to allow them to be great online. Mm-hmm. And so our first program 5 years ago was a master's in teaching with the University of Southern California. That went as well as one could ever hope. We helped them scale from 75 students to 1,500 students in 2 years. And that's at the exact same admission standards, the exact same graduation rate, the exact same job placement rate as on campus from one of the top ed schools in the country. In the process, that school went from being ranked 38th in the country to 15th in the country, the fastest drop in the history of the ed school rankings. So as you can imagine, they were pretty pleased with the outcome, and so we helped them launch a second program with their School of Social Work. Exact same story. Third program was with Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and that was a master's in nursing. Fourth was the first top 20 MBA program available online with UNC Chapel Hill. Fifth, the Master of Laws with WashU in St. Louis. which I happen to be quite fond of and is near where all of you are now. And we've continued down the line. We've now launched 8 graduate programs across different verticals. And 2 months ago, we announced Semester Online. And Semester Online is a group of 15 of the top 30 schools in the country right now who have come together to say that they are going to offer 4-credit undergraduate courses, not a full degree, but individual courses for their students and students around the world, which they'll leverage our platform and our infrastructure to offer. And so the founding institutions were WashU, Duke, Northwestern, and Emory, but they're joined by schools like Notre Dame, Wake Forest, Vanderbilt, Brandeis, University of Rochester, UNC Chapel Hill. So great schools coming together to offer individual courses for credit for their students and others who can apply and take those courses in live small groups with their own students on campus.
All right, and Jeremy, we are coming to you live from a bricks and mortar university. So what does the future hold, do you think, for bricks and mortar universities or bricks and mortar educational institutions?
That's a great question. What we're going to see over the next 10 years is a flight to quality. And what I mean by that is we live in a world now of highly imperfect information around educational outcomes. For you to go to school, to get a graduate degree, to choose which school you're going to, requires you to really do a huge amount of research to understand what the implications of that would be for your life. And even after that research, it's very difficult to understand what makes the most sense. Where should you go to college? Where should you go to grad school? And what we're going to see over the next 10 years is, as we move more and more online, we're also going to see a better and better information around data and student outcomes. So you'll be able to make more informed decisions as a person as to how you want to pursue higher education. And what that also means is that the schools that do it really well are going to get even better. They're going to have more students that want to go there. And the schools that don't do it really well are going to really struggle because students are going to have the ability to go online or offline to the best schools if they're able to manage it. And as a result of that, as a result of those geographic boundaries being torn down, it's going to become a lot harder for the schools that don't do it as well. And so you're going to see a rapid increase in the quality of education, but it's going to then concentrate in a smaller number of institutions. So half of all 4-year schools over the next 15 years won't exist in 15 years. Like literally half of all 4-year schools. There are 4,000 undergraduate institutions in the United States right now. That will be probably 2,000 in 15 years. And the remaining 2,000 are going to be a lot better. They're going to be a lot higher quality, and they're going to be able to give you much better insight into the impact that educational achievement at that institution will have on your life.
So what do you think about a bricks and mortar institution that perhaps maybe embraces the technology of online, the human media movement? What do you think the future holds for a bricks and mortar university that recognizes that perhaps some of their physical classes can also be supplemented with virtual classes due to that global despatialization?
That's exactly what's going to happen. So the ones that are going to succeed to the greatest extent are going to be the bricks and mortar universities that leverage technology effectively. They are in the best position moving forward to really evolve and improve upon what they're doing by leveraging technology, and in a way that makes them, really sets them up to succeed in an extraordinary way over the next 10 years. And so what you're going to see is a combination. Some schools will approach it from the standpoint that we are doing, which is you can be anywhere and leverage technology in order to actually be physically present in the classroom. And as especially things like sort of virtual reality and telepresence become better and better, you're going to see more and more opportunities for that, both in academia and in the business world, actually. And we're only a few years away from that being a reality. But you're also going to see schools improving learning outcomes through technology. By embracing technology now, schools are also improving their on-campus academic experience because they're bringing the technology and the learning from that pure digital experience back into the classroom in ways that involve things like getting rid of textbooks and being able to have smarter approaches to sort of content acquisition, to being able to do a flipped classroom model where students will actually do some type of assignment in their dorm or out of the classroom and then come to class able to discuss it. So they'll have a lecture which will be taped, because really lectures are a bad use of human talent at the end of the day. If you can say something once, you can say it 100 times, you might as well record it. Now, a conversation like we're having right now, you can't record that and have it had the same effect. You need to actually engage. This is what human interaction is really like designed for, and this is what one should really be trying to optimize for in terms of a live experience, is real interaction. And I think schools are going to realize that more and more and actually leverage that to make themselves more effective.
So speaking of that live interaction, can you hear me, Jeremy?
Okay, I can now, yeah.
Speaking of that live interaction, are you using, what kind of technology are you using? Are you, in your courses, is it asynchronous, strictly text-based, or are you using any kind of video chat? And if so, what real-time communication are you using?
So our belief is that the best online education requires you to have a complete understanding of the technology that's available and to use on a case-by-case basis that which is most effective. And so there are three pillars that are very distinct that exist in all of our programs, but they take on different shapes depending on what one's trying to teach. So those three pillars, you actually just hit on two of them. You've got very high-quality asynchronous content, and by that I mean, let's say that your goal is to teach someone how to build a car. What you really should do, you shouldn't record someone talking about it. You should actually do a high-quality 60-minute style expose on building a car, make it really engaging and compelling for the medium, and then let students go into the synchronous live environment where they can discuss that with a real person. So you start with this very high-quality asynchronous content that a student can watch and get involved with and engage with at any time, and then you move directly into at least a weekly live session where you have to show up at 2 o'clock and engage with your peers and professor around that content. That's also critically important. The third is actually building out a robust social network that allows students, like Google Hangout or Facebook, that allows students to connect with their peers and professors in a way that they can take offline. So just like you need the live social experience of these classes, you need asynchronous social experiences also. And those asynchronous social experiences bring sort of the overall experience to life more so. It really increases engagement because you feel like you know, you can see the profiles of your peers and professors. You can create groups with them. We have groups in our MBA program that are, you know, dads in New York in the MBA at UNC. We have librarians at USC. People have created their own groups to connect and sort of bring and come together based on their own interests, and those social interactions increase their educational outcomes.
Absolutely. Want to give the opportunity as well for any individuals in the room who would like to come forward and ask a question. Feel free to do so. In regards to Midwestern entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs right here in Columbia, Missouri, what would you tell an entrepreneur, perhaps who is interested in an education startup, or maybe a non-education startup? What would be the most important one or two things that you would tell them?
Well, first of all, I would say that as you mentioned, I was in Columbia 2 weeks ago. Spent a few days there with many of the people who are involved today, and I was, quite frankly, blown away. I've spent a lot of time on the coasts, both building companies but also interacting with entrepreneurs, and you guys have a pretty incredible ecosystem developing, and one that you should be really, really both proud of and excited about, because it's difficult to do, and you guys are doing it really well. My reaction from meeting many of the entrepreneurs I did in Columbia was that these men and women are every bit as talented, as smart, and as effective as some of the best entrepreneurs I've met at large venture-backed companies on the coasts. And so the first thing I would say is, don't feel as if by virtue of being in Columbia you don't have the ability to impact the world more broadly. You absolutely do. Technology is part of that story, but you guys have a fantastic ecosystem developing, and continuing to build out that ecosystem and to really continue reaching, continue seeking to have an impact like you're going to, and you are, you know, it would be unfair to say put Columbia on the map, because you guys are already on the map in a major way, but continue developing Columbia into one of the premier startup and technology hubs in the country. I don't think that's unattainable.
I don't think it's unattainable at all, because this is the magic carpet. This is, we have the ability to go around the world, around the block in a matter of seconds, and chat with you face to face. So that is wonderful. What, as far as Midwest entrepreneurs, what advice could you give to them about accessing capital or relationships at New York or some other place? What could you tell them about accessing capital specifically?
I would say that the most important thing for all startups is to build momentum. And so there's often a notion in the startup community that the answer is always capital. Like, if you could get access to capital, then you could build something phenomenal. And ironically, capital is one of the single greatest destroyers of a great idea. And it sounds contradictory, but what ends up happening in many cases is if you raise money, it allows you to overlook the other issues that are taking place. And so if you think about the biggest, most successful companies in the world, like you're talking about Apple, Google, Oracle, Cisco, eBay, none of them, PayPal, none of them started off building what they currently make money doing. None of them. They all had massive pivots at some point, because what they realized is what they thought they were going to do actually isn't a very good idea. And it's not that they weren't very smart people. Pierre Omidyar is a very, very bright guy. Like, Peter Thiel and the PayPal team are very smart. But you can't completely predict how people will interact with your products and services. And so what you need to do as an entrepreneur is build things and move forward as quickly as you can and build momentum around your mission. What happens is that as you're building, you'll realize generally that there are things that need to change. You'll pivot slightly. One of those pivots is going to turn into the company that you actually should be. When you hit that, then you should raise capital. Before that, money will actually make it harder to see what that pivot should be, and will make it that much harder for you to figure out what the real business is that you're building. And so at the outset, I would say, don't think of capital as the end-all be-all. To the extent that you can find ways to limit capital needed, it allows you to think much more critically about building the business. Now, that disclaimer aside, I would say that there are services like AngelList. There are services like many of the crowdfunding startups that are coming together now that are making it simpler to connect with angel investors around the country, and you should absolutely get involved with them. And you should get involved with them long before you actually need to raise capital, because you should understand what they're doing, and you should familiarize yourself with the people and institutions that do provide capital when you don't need it, because then they actually want to talk to you also. They don't feel like they're being sort of hit up for a date when they don't know who you are. And so start building those relationships long before, but also avoid capital if at all possible. And obviously one needs to live and to be able to eat, but avoid taking on capital that would force you to gloss over the challenges that actually are the basis of your real business.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some of those crowdfunding sources for people in this room who might not be familiar, maybe beyond Indiegogo or Kickstarter. What are some of places that you're finding entrepreneurs having success as far as funding?
I think Angel Vine has grown very, very quickly and has really connected a large number of people and organizations at this point. I think you're starting to see a lot more activity around GUST as well, G-U-S-T, and they connect really most of the larger angel networks in the country at this point. I think that looking at, again, Kickstarter and Indiegogo, as you mentioned, are both great things to familiarize yourself with and sort of connect with more broadly. There are a lot of incubators also around the country that are sort of creating environments where you can just more easily connect with potential funders. And so I would say do a general sweep of those areas, understand what's going on there, and when it makes sense, start experimenting with what seems like it would be the most effective for you. Recognizing that it may be multiple different approaches that actually make the most sense for you.
Okay. Let's talk about pivoting, because you had mentioned that. How do you know when to pivot, and what were some of your pivots that you had in your career?
Great questions. So we've had a bunch of small ones. When we started this current company, I was 24 years old, and so I was relatively young at the point. I left undergrad. I was an undergraduate student at Princeton up until 2006, when I left after my junior year to start a company called Zandigo that was a social network around the admissions process for undergrads. And the goal there was to connect high school students with colleges looking to recruit them using additional data points for things other than athletics, basically. So I built that for 2 years, sold it, and moved to New York. Was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, and ended up connecting with people I'd met through my previous company in the education space, and we begun talking about really education and online education more broadly, but also this massive issue we saw with grade schools not leveraging technology and the internet to build transformative programs. And so, that being said, that was part of the discussion, but our intent was really initially to build a master's in teaching program with USC. Like, our goal was, can this work at USC in this master's in teaching program? We had no idea at that point, one, if anyone would want to do it, two, if any school would want to take part in it, and three, even if the school did, even if we did move forward with USC, would any other school ever want to, or was it the unique combination of our sort of relationships and interactions that made it possible? And so we also had no idea that live classes were going to be so critically important. When we initially started, we actually thought of the educational model a lot more like what the MOOCs are, massively open online courses. And we realized pretty quickly that the live component actually drives a lot of the student outcomes. Unfortunately, it also brings with it a lot of the costs. Professors are expensive, but that's critically important if your goal is to maintain those same student outcomes. And so it's a constant process of learning and iterating to try to figure out how you build the courses, how you market to those students. There's no simple way or simple plan. One has to be open to this notion of things are constantly in flux, and you need to continue building momentum. Know where you want to get to, but be very comfortable with the fact that you're going to zig and zag along the way, because you're going to learn a lot over that experience. And what makes you uniquely qualified to build the company is what you learn along the way. It's not your insanely brilliant idea coming in. Like, unfortunately, like, no matter how smart it seems, your idea probably isn't good. That doesn't mean you shouldn't start the company. That means you should start the company with the best idea you can, while recognizing that that idea will likely not end up being the final iteration of what you end up building. It will likely look very different.
We have a question from our Google Plus stream. They are asking, with the interest in high-end manufacturing, have you applied this business model to the new industrial tech 1 to 2 year education, aka the new blue-collar, green-collar jobs?
So it's a really interesting market. We have not applied it thus far because our experience has primarily been on full degree programs with top universities. And so the sort of marketing infrastructure that we've developed to find sort of the type of people that would go to a top 20 MBA program would be very different than the marketing infrastructure that one would develop to sort of go into that type of 1 to 2 year experience around high-tech industrial design or development. And so it's a really interesting market, and someone should clearly address it, but it would require a significant shift in terms of the infrastructure that we've built, and that is allowing us to grow as a company very, very quickly. So while it wouldn't make sense for us right now, someone should definitely do it.
Okay. Another question from the Google Plus stream. This is from Bob Noble, who's watching. He says, how do you see sponsorships and advertising sponsorships being used in the future as a method to gain capital for startups? Would it be a safer short-term solution instead of going down the road of singing away a percentage of a startup with an angel investor. So what are your thoughts on sponsorships and advertising partnerships being used in startups? Bob Noble, thank you for that question.
Really good question, Bob. What I would do consistently is optimized for success. So what I heard a little bit there, that the concern would be around dilution from an initial investment. That wouldn't be the reason that I would not raise capital. Now, if you weren't sure what you would do with the money, that's a good reason to not raise capital. But if the concern is dilution, ultimately, you're optimizing for the wrong thing. If it's successful, you're much better off having a smaller piece of something really significant than not being able to scale it. Now, there are some people that have been able to scale really effectively, and it's really hard, but have been able to scale really effectively without significant capital. And that's an even better way to go about it if you can. But that's all to say that don't worry as much about dilution. What you should worry about, especially the first couple times, is optimizing for success of the venture. Now, going back to the question itself, if you have the opportunity to raise capital through sponsorships, if someone wants to give you money in order to promote them, and it's significant enough to not distract you, then you should absolutely take it. And being able to raise funding without giving up equity is clearly a better option. That being said, it's rare. And so what I wouldn't do is seek out sort of fundraising in that way as sort of a goal, because unless you have a connection or an existing relationship that's going to make it possible, it's highly likely that you're going down a dead-end path that will distract you and that will ultimately prevent you from being able to execute on the core business. And so you want to avoid distractions as much as possible, and fundraising is a distraction also. You want to avoid distraction and focus on the business itself as much as you possibly can. And so I would say that if you have, the question sounds to me like you have an opportunity to raise money through a sponsorship of some sort, and if that's the case, absolutely take it. But I wouldn't go out and seek sponsorship as a way to, as an alternate financing path, if you don't have some unfair advantage in that way that would make that easier, because sponsorships are becoming harder and harder and more data driven in terms of the outcomes that people are looking for, just like every other aspect of marketing.
Okay. We have another question on the stream. This is from a faculty member at Mizzou who shall not be named. And the question is, what about getting faculty on board with online education? Many faculty members do not believe in the online education or the e-learner. So what's
it's a great,
and by the way,
question.
You guys are watching Jeremy Johnson. He's the co-founder of 2U, if you're just tuning in.
It's a great question. And so I actually spend a good amount of time in faculty meetings. And if I'm ever in an environment with a group of faculty members, more than 10, and there isn't someone that thinks I'm the devil and someone that thinks I'm like, the Messiah, then I know I'm in the wrong meeting. Like I'm clearly not in a group of faculty at a great school. Faculty members are, by virtue of what they do, incredibly smart and incredibly inquisitive, and they're generally skeptical about the world. And so one has to approach it from the standpoint of asking questions. You have to understand what people really care about, and you have to be able to then back up your answers with data. And so in our case, the first time around required a huge amount of faith to say, we're going to hold hands, us and USC, and just, jump off this cliff together and let's see what happens. But after that program, we were able to show that these students, first of all, USC controls the admissions, our partners control admissions, and so you're not polluting admission standards. You have the exact same graduation rate. That's data and an important data point. The exact same job placement rate in that program. You had a higher percentage of students flying to USC to walk at graduation than on-campus students walking at graduation. Like, these data points are really, really important in explaining to future partners that this is real, that the outcomes are real, that this is not sort of online education as it was known 10 years ago, that online is a viable option for teaching in a really high-quality way. It's not easy, it's not cheap, but it is really effective when done correctly. And you can show that if you're able to listen to their concerns, because their concerns are totally valid, maybe slightly outdated, but totally valid, and then actually address them with real data. And for us, that's been the most effective.
Great. We have someone coming forward. Tell us your name and your question.
I'm Huan Chong from University of Missouri at Columbia. So I have a question for you. So last year I was in the MIT X, now EDX initiative of online learning from MIT. And it was the best course that I ever had. But one of the questions that was posed to the founder of MIT X was that how do you monetize the online learning, class? And the director of MIT X, I believe he. Dr. Awal, he just smiled. He's like, I have no idea. So what are some ways to, what are some possible revenue streams that you can see from online education?
So what are some possible revenue streams that you can see from online education? Thank you.
So there are a lot of potential revenue streams. The real question is, what are the potential revenue streams that can actually sustain a business? So, for instance, there's a lot of discussion right now amongst the MOOCs of being able to help in terms of job placement. So if you score really highly on an individual course, let's say 100,000 people take a course, 10% finish it, so you're now down to 10,000 people, and of those people that finished, you want to take the top 1%. So, you're down now to, 100 people. You don't have that great of an ability, even starting from 100,000 people taking a course, to be able to place those top 10% or top 1% of finishers in jobs, even if you could directly do that. So you could absolutely generate revenue that way from the top couple people in any course, but it's not going to be enough to sustain a large business. You could absolutely do an advertising model. If you could get 100,000 people taking a course, which many of the MOOCs have done, you could do advertising. But the reality is, if you're trying to do a pure ad play online, it's really tough to sustain a sizable business without not just millions, but tens of millions of people actively using your service. And so what I've seen thus far is that our model, which is a rev share on tuition, and I can't tell you exact revenue, but assume that we're able to sustain the business and have 500 plus employees. Our model is the only one that I've seen that's able to actually scale a business while also bringing really high quality education to students in a for-credit way. And so there are a lot of people thinking about it. I think that new models are absolutely going to emerge, but of the dozen companies in this space, or at least vaguely connected to this space, I don't know of anyone other than us that's actually been able to scale revenue and therefore scale the business. So it's a complex question, and one that is clearly going to evolve, but there are not a lot of good answers right now. And I think there's a question there, what is our model again? It's a revenue share on tuition. So on each student that comes in, we in the university share a fixed percentage of the tuition for the services that we provide.
Great. Jeremy Johnson, co-founder of 2U. Thank you so much for joining us. I believe we are done with our questions here, but we got one more. Come on forward, fella. And if you can state your name and,
Jeremy, thanks for taking time to answer my question. My name is Alex, and I own a digital publication online which focuses more on the lifestyle of college. And I find myself partnering up with ULoop, who's also more of a news versus lifestyle publication, and we're training our writers.
Yeah, we've done some content development with them.
Yeah, he actually, I was text messaging him, and he says he knows a couple of people, but we're actually developing a couple of platforms and videos to educate our writers, because we find that a lot of times they struggle writing on the online format. And for me, we're getting probably about 50,000 views a month, and we're growing. But I'm obviously worried that the advertisement revenue isn't going to be enough to sustain a large business in the future. So building out these training programs for our writers, I have a couple of ideas and I want to kind of run them by you. First of all, could we team up with institutions eventually and offer them the training in some way? And then secondly, if we end up offering the training, let's say we have a lot of writers in a database, could we actually sell these writers to other publications focused around college, or maybe afterwards, if they want to write for a publication that's not focused on college, they would leave trained, not to mention the experience of writing for us. And ULoop is also partnered with USA Today College and Huffington Post College. And so I guess there's some of the things that I'm running through my mind, trying to figure out the future growth for our businesses and partnerships.
Thanks for
a great question, and I think you're thinking about it in the right way. Advertising can generate revenue for you, but it's going to be challenging to build a large business based entirely on that. And so, your question of what other streams become viable is a really good one. I think it's going to be challenging moving forward to monetize access to individual writers. That being said, I think being able to monetize access to distribution channels is going to become easier and easier. And so there's actually a phenomenal company in Columbia called DTA, Digital Talent Agents. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it, that is actually leveraging a fairly similar model and is a very, very impressive company. John Hall is one of the co-founders there, and you've got a really interesting model for basically leveraging access and a team of writers in order to be digital talent agents for individuals and companies, and they're just doing a fantastic job of it. So I think that's one example of being able to leverage writing and one's ability to write and being able to create high quality content around something that has more immediately marketable value, like a distribution channel. And so being able to reach out to people, being able to help someone bring their message to a larger audience, not necessarily advertising based, but to bring it to a larger audience, is something that is definitely going to be effective moving forward. So keep pushing, keep looking for ways to do that, and you will figure it out. But good luck. And if I can be helpful to anyone else, if any further questions, please, you can find me on Twitter at @JeremyJ. I'm happy to answer additional questions.
Sounds good. And Kelsey, by the way, Kelsey from Digital Talent Agents is speaking at 3:30 as well. So there you go.
There you go.
Hey,
well, you should ask her about this. She's a good one.
Yeah, it's been great to meet you. So appreciate your time and availing yourself as well. And we will see you later. Appreciate your time. Thanks for checking in.
I look forward to it. Thank you guys very much. Great to meet you all, and good luck, everyone.